So it is 7:02, and I am going to get started now, and I'm sure the others will join us within a moment or two. Welcome and thank you for being here tonight. Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship December presentation. Joanne Pizzino, MD, Connecting Body and Mind for Optimal Wellness. We want to thank you for joining us this evening, and if you're here for the first time, welcome. We're so glad you found us. If you've been with us before, welcome back to the SFF community, and you know how it goes. You know how we work here. My name is Smith Prim. I'm the co-chairman for the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship, along with Catherine Smart. Catherine's also our writer and our editor, and so she's responsible for getting all the communication out on the internet and our website. It's quite a job. We thank her for it. And Sandra Castillo is our new secretary. We've got a new secretary, yay. And Kim Kasdorf is our media director. He's responsible for editing the video and getting it posted up on YouTube. And we do that as often as we can. We did have an event recently we could not post because of copyrighted material. And so that's only very occasional that we do that, or that happens, but we have to be respectful of that situation. Eileen Jenna is our program coordinator, and she does a fantastic job bringing interstellar or metastellar speakers like the one we have tonight. We're here. This is our mission. We want you to know that we are a nonprofit and all volunteer-run organization. And we're here to help you develop and enhance your spiritual, mystical, and metaphysical awareness and consciousness. We do it by sponsoring programs like the one tonight, designed to facilitate your personal growth and development, and a holistic spiritual approach to health and to living. So we are being recorded tonight. I'm responsible to do that. And so if you choose not to have your image displayed, simply just turn your camera off, and that will be just fine. You won't be recorded. I'm going to do something here really quick. Let me make a spotlight. And there we go. And but I wanted to take just a minute to do a little bit of centering. And it's really, I do it through a 3-breath meditation. So if you'll join me, we're just going to take a moment and we're going to gently close our eyes, and we're going to take a deep breath through our nose and take as deep a breath and fill your lungs with air as possible. And as you release the tensions and whatever's left over that may be distracting you from your day, and that will help you bring your focus to the meeting tonight. On our second breath, we'd like to bring in love and light into our bodies. And exhale any remaining issues or concerns that are not related to our focus tonight. And then our last breath that we take in, bring in even more love and light and your focus and concentration to bring to Dr. Joanne Pizzino and her message tonight. And exhale. And you can open your eyes and join us again. I'm so honored to introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Joanne Pizzino. And just a quick intro for Dr. Pizzino. Do you ever find that your mind-body techniques like affirmations and guided visualizations don't quite yield the results that you expect? It's not uncommon, and our esteemed speaker will show us how to improve those results by employing the fascinating field of mind-body interaction. And a little bit about Dr. Pizzino. She is a seasoned physician and board-certified expert in preventive and integrative medicine. Tonight she'll detail proven techniques that can be harnessed under your conscious control to transform the cells and functions of your body, as well as improve the quality of your life by tapping into both neural networks, the field of unlimited possibilities. She says that these subtle energies are capable of healing us even of severe conditions like cancer and empowering the seemingly immobile and manifesting the life of your dreams. So I'm looking forward to the message tonight. Then before we start, I just wanted to let you know that our presentation is in two parts. There's a presentation, which is the primary part, and we take a little break at 8:30, and then we come back for Q&A. The Q&A is the unique feature that you get by attending the meeting in person. It gives you the ability to interact with the speaker and ask her questions directly. So you won't get that on the recording, although the recordings are sought after by many. I would like to, so now, if we all are in agreement, please sit back and prepare to enjoy the informative and enlightening presentation by Dr. Joanne Pizzino.
Hello, everyone. Greetings and salutations. I am really honored to be asked by you to talk about this subject that I'm extremely passionate about. And I feel kind of odd being the presenter, as I've been to lots of SFF presentations over very many years. It is quite an honor to be able to talk with other like-minded people who are interested in spirituality and the mystical. I've actually had quite a few mystical experiences, and I'm going to talk about at least one of those in detail tonight and show you how I was able to use that to actually change what was going on in my health, and how I've used that with other people over the years. So I'm going to share my screen here to have some slides while we do this to hopefully help this come across to you a bit better. I do have a website, and there is information on there about the mind-body approaches. I have some private membership information. If you decide to become a free member on the site, you get additional links to the mind-body information. It also has information about my medical intuitive readings, and you are all invited to try those. I do have some slots tomorrow to be able to do that if anyone is interested. Science and spirituality has been my top passion since I had what I call a miracle with my neck nearly 27 years ago. I think that this is one of the most exciting times to be a spiritual being having a human experience, because we now actually have a lot of science that helps us document what is actually going on in some of these experiences. I will be talking a lot about brain science, and I offer the caveat that the brain is not the same as the mind, and it is also not the same thing as who you really are. I think you know that, but we sometimes get confused with some of those words. So here are objectives for this evening. We're going to talk about why you can actually harness your brain to help change your physical body, what exactly is happening, and then exactly how to do it. I will be sprinkling in my own experience as well as some of my patients. It's all anonymous, but I want you to be aware that real life people experience these things. I'm going to take you back to what happened to me in 1997. Prior to that, though, because what happened to me in 97 actually started on a beach in Grand Cayman 13 years before that. I was there with a man called Lee, who was my partner. He was, at that time, the only man I had ever lived with. We were very much in love. We went to Grand Cayman to learn how to scuba dive. And we had spent the whole week under the water. Grand Cayman is one of the most sought after dive locations in the world. It is truly a magical experience under the water. And at that time, in 1984, Grand Cayman's a long, skinny island. One whole side was covered with resorts and international banks, and the other side was completely deserted. There was nothing there at all, and we really liked deserted places, so we went and drove out there. We didn't see anyone at all day long, and we were actually getting ready to make love on the beach when out of the bushes came a very large, muscular man with no shirt on. He was an African American. His entire head was swathed in towels except for a little slit for his eyes, and he was carrying a very large wooden club. He ran up to us, grabbed Lee, spun him around, and made this symbol across his throat. He never spoke to us. He cut across his throat and pointed at us. And in dive parlance, under the water, that's the emergency signal. It means out of air. And so we had no idea what was going on. We were yelling at him to tell us what he wanted. And for no reason that we were ever able to discern, he took the club and whacked Lee on the side of the face with it. I did not know that he actually knocked Lee's eye out of the socket at the time. Lee fell to the ground. Right as the man had come up to us, Lee had handed me the dive knife, which we had been using to pry sea urchins and things off the tidal pools. Their dive knives are very thick. They're for prying, not for cutting. And Lee said, "Go get help." But I moved between the man and I fended off a few more blows with the knife. Lee got to his feet. He said, "Go get help." I knew it was miles away the last time we had seen people. I ran about 20 yards down the beach, and I knew this guy was going to kill Lee before I got back. And I turned around, and sure enough, he was choking Lee. And I ran back and I said, "The heart's on the left side." And I tried to stick the knife in him, but it didn't go in very far. Anyway, a big melee ensued, and there was arms and legs everywhere. I actually cut Lee a few times, and I kept trying to pass the knife to Lee, thinking he was the man, he was going to save us, but I didn't know he was blind, and he couldn't see me trying to pass the knife to him. And so we ended up in this pile. I was on the bottom. The man had about half of my hair in his hand. All three of us had our hands on the knife. And I knew that if I didn't get out of that pile, I was going to die. And I was about to just use every bit of energy that I had when I noticed that I had actually put some holes in the guy's abdomen and his guts were hanging out. And when I looked at this, he kind of looked down at himself and was pretty shocked, I'm sure. Lee took advantage of that instant and kicked him in the face, and he let go of us. And we started to run down the beach. And this is when I found out Lee was blind, because he was running into the ocean. And I pulled him out, and we went out onto the street. We were covered with blood, and happened to be this American jogging by. And we told him to get help. He got the resort manager, who took us to the police station. And at the police station, you know, they take your name and address. And although we were not married, Lee told them that I was his wife. And I didn't think that it was that crucial to correct that tiny bit of information given the circumstance. But that was actually how I got married. I had PTSD afterwards. I didn't really understand what was going on. We eventually went to the hospital, and it was a very tiny hospital, and they wheeled the man in. He claimed he had been hit by a car, but it was clearly sharp, not blunt trauma that he had. And I pointed to him and told the police that this was the man who had done this. We ended up having to go back to Grand Cayman for 2 trials. the story that he told about what he was doing was so preposterous that the judge literally stood up and laughed at him and told him that he had better get a new story and a new lawyer for the next trial, which he did, and was eventually convicted of assault with grievous harm, and was sent to jail for 2 years. I couldn't talk about this for about 5 years afterwards because I would just completely fall apart. I even had a hard time. I had to kind of practice to be able to talk about it tonight. And when we got back to Houston, where I lived at the time, I had all of the symptoms of PTSD. I had flashbacks and nightmares. And if you told me Martians had landed, I would have believed you. I was afraid to go to the grocery store. I was, thought there was monsters under the bed. I lived in a tremendous state of fear because here I had been at this idyllic paradise in the Caribbean, and this horrible thing happened to me. I had never been involved in any kind of violence. I didn't grow up with any kind of violence. So it was a really horrifying experience for me. So flashing forward 13 years, I began to have this neck pain, and then I had no sensation going down my right arm into my hand, and ended up being put on disability. I worked at IBM at the time, and I could not sit for 60 seconds. I define 10 out of 10 pain is when it takes up your entire consciousness. And this was about 9 out of 10 pain. I couldn't drive anywhere because I couldn't pay attention to other cars or things like that. And I went to 2 of the best neurosurgeons, one at Duke and another in private practice. And they told me that I needed urgent surgery on my neck in order to avoid becoming a quadriplegic. And that was about the worst possible news anyone could give me. I was absolutely terrified. So going to the doctor actually made things worse, not better. And this was back in 1997. Any of you who are living in North Carolina at that time know that we didn't even license many types of alternative healthcare practitioners at that time. We still don't license some, like naturopaths. I strongly recommend you contact your legislatures to remedy that. This is absurd in the modern era. But even chiropractors were not considered mainstream back then. And people that started to give me all this information about energy healing. I was a medical doctor. I'd never heard of Reiki before. I didn't know how to spell it. I didn't know what energy healing was, but I was really desperate. And I couldn't even go to see people at their offices. They actually came to my house and did various things for me. Finally, I made and broke the surgery appointment twice and decided to stake all of my health on having some sort of a miracle. I was an agnostic at the time. I really didn't know what a miracle was, but I was willing to stake my health on it. And someone had given me a Carolyn Myss tape, MYSS. Some of you are probably familiar with her. I highly recommend her books and her programs, especially if you really want to learn about the chakra system. She's excellent at describing that. And so I was literally lying on the ground on the first day of spring because I couldn't sit. I was outside on my deck, lying on the deck. And I was listening to her Why People Don't Heal tape. And she said, sometimes the reason people don't heal is that they need to forgive. And I'm literally lying there thinking, I'm a pretty good person. I don't hold grudges. Who do I need to forgive? And I had a blinding flash on the man who had tried to kill me 13 years before, whom I always hoped rotted in hell. But at that instant, which I actually attribute to the energy healing, even though no one was with me at the time, and I chose to forgive him. And even more than this, I chose to thank him for what he had done, although it put into motion my disastrous first marriage and divorce, and a lot of pain with all of that. I actually think the forgiveness is what got the grace to start to come. I have no idea what to call it, and so I call it grace. Of course, it's the same Latin root as the word gratitude. And if there is one thing you can do, we're going to talk a lot more about aligning emotions with our thoughts and intentions this evening. I personally find gratitude to be the easiest elevated emotion that I can get myself into. It is the ultimate state of receivership. And if you can become grateful for whatever is happening, even in the face of tremendous pain or other difficult circumstances, gratitude allows us access to grace. And so we're going to talk more about that tonight. So anyway, while I was laying there listening to this tape, instantaneously, the pain was gone. I was able to sit up. It took me about a week to get the full strength back in my arm. And that's been almost 27 years ago. It changed everything about my life. I knew that there was something that they did not tell me in medical school. And I've spent the last 27 years trying to learn what that is. And I also knew that there was something much greater than me out there. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about this evening, is how to more consciously access whatever that is. We actually have names for it in medical science, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So now I'm going to go briefly into the science of this so that you can understand that there is actually some rationale for what I'm talking about. I won't spend a huge amount of time on that, but I do want you to understand that this is not just a woo-woo thing anymore. We're going to start with talking about the autonomic nervous system. Every minute of every day, your brain and body are communicating with each other, primarily through this autonomic nervous system. Only about 5% of your thoughts are actually conscious. The other 95% is what this autonomic nervous system is doing in the background, outside of your awareness. That is literally the subconscious. The subconscious includes many things, and many people have different abilities to contact this. Your body is one of those things. I think of it as kind of an antenna to gather information about the environment. And so we're going to learn a little bit more tonight about what to do with that information that you gather. The autonomic nervous system is running everything in the background. It's beating your heart, digesting your food, controlling your blood pressure, all of that without your conscious intervention. In fact, some people get very nervous and scared, and they go to the doctor when they become aware of this happening. They're now aware of things not working right in their guts. They're aware of their hearts beating or their blood pressure going up or things like that. And that can be quite scary when that happens. I try to think of it as information. And we're going to talk about information without judgment, just information. Advanced neuroscience has taught us how we can access this. Some of you may have heard of Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body, literally goes from the brain down into all of your internal organs. And there are more fibers going from your internal organs up to your brain than from the brain down. So all of this information going on, especially in your gut, with your hormones, with your gonads, with your heart and lungs, all of that information is being fed back into the brain. And we now actually have different techniques that allow us to control that. Your brain is monitoring both your internal and your external environments. The internal environment includes thoughts and emotions. One of the reasons I strongly encourage people to meditate, and we're actually going to talk about a dose of meditation that has been shown to change your parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the autonomic nervous system. The dose in the studies is 20 minutes, at least 3 times a week. Personally, my experience is the more I have meditated, the more I am able to tune in to what's going on in that internal environment and get clues from it, as well as being able to pay attention to messages that you get from dreams and other things. Emotions are actually stored in your body as magnetic fields in smooth muscle. Striated muscle is like arms and legs. Smooth muscle is lining of blood vessels, lining of gut, lining of the bronchial tree. And that's where we store emotions. So it's not really too mysterious to know that the negative emotions often show up as butterflies in the gut or chest tightness or high blood pressure, because those emotions are actually moving that small muscle. The neuroscience for this is now so sophisticated that every device you use is literally influencing your choices outside of your awareness and taking advantage of that 95% of the subconscious. I'm going to pause there for a moment and say that again, because you need to be aware that the marketers are very much using this brain science to control you. I'm using this science right now, showing you images and talking about things because they change your internal environment and they change your decisions. So you want to be aware of what is going on. That way you can make choices. In fact, these ways to control our minds and our bodies and our thoughts and our emotions are so sophisticated that they are used by the most elite athletes, powerful business executives, and leaders in every field in order to focus their brain activation for success. And so you can use these same techniques in order to program your own body for health. A lot of the information that I'm going to give you today is wonderfully summarized by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Hopefully some of you have heard of him. After I had studied this for 25 years, I discovered Dr. Dispenza, and he pretty much reiterated everything that it took me 25 years to figure out. And he has it really down to the science as well as the practice. I cannot more strongly recommend using his meditations, going to one of his retreats, reading his books. The information from a scientific standpoint is of the highest quality. And I'm not a guru kind of person, but I haven't found any ego tainting the things that he says, which for me is a really important thing. So he says that thoughts are the language of the body and feelings are the language, thoughts are the language of the mind and feelings are the language of the body. And therefore, how you think and how you feel is your state of being. When you become present in this moment, and I want to thank you, Smith, for centering us. I really like doing that before starting any activity. That is becoming aware of your state of being at that moment. Again, using various techniques, we can become aware of resistances. Resistance to anything is really what sets up illness. It is pushing against the flow of energy. I love the books by Mickey Singer, The Untethered Soul, The Surrender Experiment, the new one, Living Untethered. And he describes that energy just flows. That's all it's doing all the time. It's like a freight train that is just moving. And we, in many aspects of our lives, try to get in front of the train and stop it. And that trying to stop that flow of energy is what creates most of the distress in our lives. And so one of the things that you'll hear me say over and over again, is building a little bit of wiggle room. That's what I call that space between the observer, which you become more adept with when you meditate, and my identity, who I think I am. So when I think that something is happening to me or mine or that really gets my attention, and it often creates a lot of distress. So if I can get a little bit of space, just a little bit of space, there's some room to wiggle there to actually change things. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to get that wiggle room. Research has shown that 90% of your thoughts are the same as the day before. You get up in the morning, you go to the bathroom, you make your cup of coffee, you get dressed, you do your commute to work, you eat your lunch, you come home, and you do the same things day after day after day. The same thoughts lead to the same choices, leading to the same actions and behaviors, leading to the same experiences, which cause your same feelings, thus creating your personal reality. Thinking about and remembering and analyzing your problems simply creates the same reality. In order to have a new personal reality, you have to become a new self. This is I love Dispenza. One of his first books is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, because it's not easy to do this, but you have to become a person without the disease or condition that you are trying to change. And his research, which he is now publishing, is astounding. His research has actually identified a protein that meditators get that protects people from COVID. And by meditating, you can do this kind of change in your body. Becoming a new person is much easier said than done, but this is where we need that wiggle room, because when my identity is all tied up, in other words, for instance, my pain, my diabetes, my cancer, my headaches, whatever they are, when you own them, They own you. And so becoming aware of your own self-talk about these things, one of the things that I really try to become aware of is not using the phrase, I am anything. People say, hi, how are you? I am fine. I am not good in whatever way. Well, I am not any of those things. I may have a condition. I may, my liver may be experiencing something. My spine may be experiencing something, but that is not me. So I really become aware of using these thoughts in my environment. And so this is one way to choose new thoughts, which then help you to have new experiences, because you make new choices and that creates new actions. And this is a really important thing. After I had what I call my miracle with my neck, I had this idea about angels and trumpets bringing some kind of miracle down that changed my body. I thought the bone spurs in my neck had been zapped, and I was never going to have to deal with this again in my life. And if I had gone forward living the same life that I had had before that and just said, oh, great, okay, now I can go back to the gym, I can go and ride my bike and do everything that I want to do, I don't think that that would have been the case for me. But the fact is, I lead a very active life, and I have not had a moment that I couldn't do that again because of what was going on in my neck. So I made new choices. This is the same idea that if you want to lose weight, but you keep eating the wrong foods, it's not a big surprise when you don't get what your intention is. So we have to align our actions with our intentions, and that will bring us new experiences, and then we get to choose new feelings. But you have to kind of be on the outlook for those new experiences, because if I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried, but I failed, that message, I failed, becomes your experience. And so you are looking for, how did I fail? How did I fail? How did I fail? And you don't get to experience the new feeling that you're looking for in order to change your experience. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Affirmations and intentions only address the 5% of the conscious mind. And so we need to recruit the other 95% of that subconscious, which is including your body. This can even include things like your posture. So for instance, we know that depressed people tend to have this kind of a posture. And if I had you all kind of slump over and get into this posture, in a very few minutes, you would actually notice your mood lowering. The same thing happens when we sit up and hold in our muscles and make our core strong. I feel more powerful when I do that. And so these kinds of things feed back between the mind and the body. To change means to overcome your environment and your circumstances, to be at cause rather than to be at effect. So when we do something, and let's just say I am doing Reiki on myself to cure a certain condition. Let's just say a thyroid condition or something. And I go to the doctor and I get my labs and nothing has changed. And so again, I feel like I'm a failure. I'm using external circumstances to determine who I am. Now, I may have had other experiences, perhaps those energy treatments that I was doing on myself, or my prayers, or my meditations, or my yoga, or other things led me to other things. They helped me to identify parts of myself that needed to be forgiven, other people that I needed to make amends to or try to repair relationships with. And so we need to pay attention to some of those subtle things that may happen long before the actual physical body makes changes. Especially when we use specific evocative images and listen to emotion-defining soundtracks, we can actually light up part of our brains so that we use what's called Hebb's law, that neurons that fire together wire together. So if I have a program that says, I'm stupid, or I'm the fat one in the family, or I'm the clumsy one, or whatever it is. Again, notice, I am clumsy. Really, that's you? Or is it something that you observe in your environment that you're identifying with? And so I may want to replace that with, I am becoming more coordinated, or whatever it is, to not be at the effect judging myself by what something has happened in the environment. So maybe I spill my coffee the next morning. Well, does that make me a failure? It means I haven't finished wiring those neurons together yet. You know, that if they've been doing this same thing for 50 years, then, and I think, you know, just because I made up my mind and I used my affirmations that all, you know, that those neurons are wired the way I want to set them up. Well, it takes a while to break 50 years of ingrained using those same neurons, and we have to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and start all over again in order to unplug the circuits that keep us in the same stress-inducing fight, flight, freeze patterns. And we want to lock in the parasympathetic rest and digest and repair. And we're going to talk a little bit more detail about that. So some of you may have read The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. Strongly recommend that book, or anything else by Dr. Lipton. He's a PhD biologist that spent most of his career proving that you actually have cells, receptors on the surface of your cells that know what your thoughts are doing. This is a biological truth. It's not some woo-woo thing. So this is how we can actually harness wiring and firing these neurons together to make something change. The devil is in the details. And one of the things that I have learned is that in this trying to be a new person, okay, I no longer have this pain in my elbow or whatever, and I go to do something and there's the pain again. So, and here I was harnessing this emotion. I was so joyful that I didn't have this pain in my elbow anymore, and I was going to be able to go back and play tennis again. That's kind of like spiritual bypassing. So I jumped all the way to this thing, and I didn't really actually learn how to control what was going on in my elbow. What was the feedback? What am I saying to myself about that? If we have time, I'll tell you more about a journey that I've recently had with severe joint pain. And I noticed that I was suffering with it a lot. I'd move and I'd screw up my face because it hurt. And I discovered that I felt sorry for myself because it hurt. And I am like the most can-do person that you can possibly imagine. I have changed every aspect of my lifestyle. I really follow all the things that I tell my patients to do. And it was a shock to me. But I learned that by feeling sorry for myself, I was letting myself off the hook so I could continue to have a few little secret bad behaviors. That was pretty enlightening. And it's a thing that I'm still evolving with. Interestingly, although the problem did not go away, the pain went down many orders of magnitude. So, not judging whatever we're feeling is really important. The frontal lobe of the brain is responsible for paying attention and being present in the current moment. This is what makes us possible to become conscious of our unconscious thoughts. It is where we hold our intentions, and therefore it is the frontal lobe that we can use to decide to focus ourselves on a course of action to manifest those intentions. Probably the most important thing, if you only remember one thing I'm going to tell you about tonight, is that energy is actually moved by emotions. Emotion is energy in motion. If your affirmations and your intentions have not worked in the past, it is most likely because you are not harnessing the energy of your emotions. The heart is actually 5,000 times more magnetically strong than the brain. And to change your state of being from the same familiar thoughts and feelings to being a new way, you must combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion. This is where I was talking about. I usually start simply with gratitude for whatever. Gratitude right now. Even if I still have XYZ condition, I can still speak, I can still see and hear, my mind is working, I have friends, I have people who love me, something that I can feel grateful for now, because then that starts the vibration. If I can get to the point where I'm actually grateful for whatever condition has happened to me, again, I call it the crack that lets the light in. There's things that I wouldn't have learned if I didn't have to experience this condition. And then actually being grateful for the new being that I'm becoming. Being grateful that the changes are occurring. They may not happen instantaneously. Maybe they take a year, maybe they take longer, but I can still be grateful that that's who I'm eventually going to be. The more I am actually grateful for it as if it has already happened, that's the kind of gratitude, that incredible relief. Oh, thank God that I don't have this pain or I don't have this condition anymore. That level of gratitude. One of the things I love, again, from Dispenza, he says, even if you don't end up changing your condition, you did all the actions as if this was really going to happen. Your life is already different. You're not that person that was suffering with the condition before. You have now taken action, and so you are a different person anyway. So you've really gotten something out of that, even if it's not the final goal that you wanted. And I can, again, strongly recommend going to Dispenza's seminars. I literally saw a woman with Parkinson's disease leap up onto the stage, run down the aisle. I saw a man with ALS get up out of his wheelchair. He had run 2 half marathons with ALS. It can be done. The number of people using those techniques that are actually overcoming cancer has really gotten the attention of some big universities that are now funding studies about how to use your mind to do this. The newest neuroscience proves it is absolutely possible to believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet. I pay a lot of attention to yet, but you have thought about enough times that in your mind, your brain is literally changed to look like the event has already occurred. One of the most famous studies of this was basketball players who visualized doing their free throws actually improved their success rate even more than people who simply actually physically practiced free throws. But again, they can't just see the ball going into the hoop. They have to set up, how does it feel in my body when I successfully plant that ball in the place that I want it to go? It's, again, this is used by golfers, it's used by people in tennis, all different kinds of sports, because when you create the being that successfully gets the ball in the hoop, that is what will happen for you. So we can rehearse that before we actually see the changes in our bodies. I teach this to my patients because, whoops, sorry about that, because it's so incredibly important about what's actually going on in the background. So we have all this energy in the autonomic nervous system. There are 2 branches to the autonomic nervous system: the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight or freeze, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest and repair. When the gazelle runs away from the lion, it turns all of its attention to saving its life. It shuts down rest and digest and repair. It does not stop and eat lunch. It doesn't stop and take a nap. It doesn't make a baby. It doesn't lick its wounds. It just gets its butt away to survive. But if you were to watch it in the wild, first of all, that only lasted up to 2 minutes. We are not programmed to have to experience stress 24/7 like we do in our modern world. And the fact that we don't take the effort to turn that off is a huge contributor to physical illness, because the gazelle, as soon as it saved its life, you're going to see it shake and snort and paw the ground and breathe hard to discharge that energy so that it can turn back on the rest and digest and repair. So I believe this is one of the reasons why we need exercise and why we need meditation, to specifically refocus our energy on turning on rest and digest and repair, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is similar to what a country has to do with its resources. If the country decides to expand in a world it perceives as safe, it supports new businesses, builds infrastructure, enhances education, and directs its resources to those things. That's what your body does when it feels safe. If, however, a country sees danger, fears its neighbor, has internal turmoil, it directs its resources to fighting, military force, arms races. It can't do both things at once, and neither can your body. So you have to choose where you are focusing your resources, and this is one of the things that brain programming can allow us to do. As I mentioned, we now live in this world of 24/7 stress. You have to make choices about this. Personally, I've been on a news fast for about 16 years, maybe longer, because I find that the news simply triggers that fight or flight or freeze response. Most of the time, it's simply freeze. I can't do anything about this. It's terrifying. I'll do nothing. That doesn't help me. It doesn't help the world or anyone else. And there is no difference in our brains between, I think there's really a tiger behind me, and there really is a tiger behind me. The brain acts exactly the same way, and it does the same things to our body, whether we think there's some threat or there really is some threat. So we have to consciously pull our attention away from the survival-only sympathetic nervous system so that we can turn on the restorative parasympathetic rest and digest and repair. Stress from thoughts is the same body reactions as stress from real threats. When that gazelle ran away, it had to raise its blood sugar, its blood glucose, in order to trigger its muscles. It had to raise its blood pressure in order to get enough blood to its muscles to be able to run away. It shut down its digestion. As I said, it didn't take a nap. Is this any wonder why we have an epidemic of people who can't sleep and people who have digestive problems, and we have high blood pressure and heart disease and diabetes? This is because we are not turning on the parasympathetic nervous system. So stress affects the body, not just the mind and emotions. Again, I tell this to my patients over and over and over again. We think stress is a mental, emotional thing. It is a very physical thing. There are basically 3 categories of stress. We can have physical things like traumatic injuries, but there are other physical stresses like lack of sleep. We can have chemical stresses like toxins. Viruses make toxins. We live in an extremely polluted world, and I work a lot with people to try to get toxins out of our bodies because those toxins literally put stress on your body. And this is a big alert here. Toxins are the leading cause of diabetes, not being overweight. I work with people a lot with that, and we now actually can reverse diabetes. But also, we have to think about other toxins, things like alcohol. Not controlling your blood glucose is a chemical imbalance that you actually have some control over. And then, of course, we have those emotional things that happen to us that when I talk to my patients and I ask them what was going on in their lives when this condition started, you will find over and over again that some intensely emotionally distressing thing was going on. This is how the body actually translates stress from the brain to the physical body. It's through something called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this is the chemicals of stress that we are addicted to. If you have food sensitivities, it is very likely that that thing is actually triggering this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and we need to address that. If you are addicted to listening to the news, it is because you like that little cortisol hit that actually, that being scared actually made my adrenal glands put out some more cortisol. And I actually like that feeling. Those neurotransmitters of fear I become addicted to. And overcoming the physical addiction to these neurotransmitters and hormones is every bit as difficult as it is to kick heroin or alcohol. And it may even be more difficult because it's literally programmed into our bodies. And so this is where expanding our awareness, becoming attuned to our own signals about these things, helps us to interrupt our reflexive addictive behaviors. And that's one of the things I work with people, especially when we do the medical intuitive consultations. Being able to control your brainwave states is a whole science called neurofeedback. I strongly recommend it. It's really, really useful for lots of things. You can do it at home with something called heart math, which you can learn how to do yourself. Heart math's been around for over 20 years. Very, very good science that you can actually coordinate what is going on with your brain and your heart at the same time. Beta waves are our everyday focus on what we are doing, our interactive analytical mind. We actually must calm that down and get into an alpha state, which is a slightly slower brain waves. This is when our breathing becomes more calm, more rhythmic, our hearts and brains become coherent. And this coherence is actually what Dispenza is studying with certain universities. I think it's University of California with San Diego, because when we're in the coherent state, that's what cures cancer. This is a really revolutionary concept. So I'm going to have us stop for a moment before I get into some more details about how to do this. And I want you to actually start to feel into yourself someplace. It may be very, very deeply buried. For most of us, if you use your left hand, you end up pointing to a place just to the right of your heart. If you say, "Who am I?" and you point to yourself, it kind of goes there. And this feeling that I'm asking you to look for is that which is thriving and prospering. Someplace in you, something is thriving and prospering. If that wasn't true, you wouldn't be alive. So even if you feel that your life is a complete disaster, you're sitting here listening to this. Hopefully you actually have vision as well, and you can see this, and your brain is working enough to understand that and feel that which is prospering and thriving. In medicine, we call this homeostasis. It is that innate intelligence within your body that knows how to heal itself. Everything that we do in healing relies on that. I don't care if it's energy work, antibiotics, surgery. If you did not have your body's ability to heal itself, you will not survive. So I personally think of this as the divine life force energy. You could call it love if you want to. My experience is that it is there coming to me, helping me, aiding me 24/7. The only time it's not is when I stop paying attention to it. It's still there. I just stopped paying attention. And so that personal power of attention is really something that you want to cultivate. This is why so many meditation techniques are about focus. You know, when you stare at a candle or stare at a picture of your guru or that sort of thing, those are powers of focus, because being able to focus your attention on what you want to have happen instead of all the other scary things that are going on out there that are simply blocking it. Sometimes we actually need to be able to focus on the thing that is causing us discomfort. And I assure you, it can really hurt a lot. It can be very, very uncomfortable. But if we don't allow ourselves to admit that something is bothering us, we can't fire up those neurons and figure out which ones need to be unplugged and plugged in a different way. That Hebb's law that I talked about, neurons that fire together wire together. And in many, 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 many cases, I will not say in every case, because sometimes I think it's the journey of experiencing something that is why we have it. But especially when it's gut things, pain things, things that affect our daily activities, it's often because there is some kind of trapped emotion. And most of those emotions are very uncomfortable. That's why we don't pay attention to them, because they hurt. Fear. Nobody wants to be afraid. Nobody, even, especially guys, don't even want to admit that they're afraid. And yet, we do have fear. Some people actually like fear. They go to horror movies and they bungee jump and things like that, because it's actually stimulating to have fear. So if we can become aware in that wiggle room space, so that it's not me that's afraid, it's what I'm observing about the fear, that becomes something that I have a little bit of ability to deal with. Same thing with anger. Anger is really, really frightening. I might hurt myself. I might hurt someone else if I admit that I'm really angry. For instance, I had to deal with a whole bunch of stuff about anger with my shoulder. Shoulders are one of the symbols of anger. And so we look at that a lot. But I have found that actually the most difficult emotion for me to sit with is sadness. I can't think of anything good about it. It hurts. Losing someone, grief, loss of any sort, feels like I am no longer the person I was because I lost this thing. My identity is tied up with it, and it really hurts as my identity unravels because of that loss. So acknowledging that these mental and emotional stresses are manifesting in the body can be a very important step. Again, it's using that power of attention. This is what your free will is. You have 100% control over your attention. That you do have control over. It is always, always, always about you. It's never about someone else. Just because your mother does XYZ, or your brother does blah, 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 or your boss is this way, or the president does this, or Putin does that, whatever it is, it's still about you, because it is about your relationship to that thing. And learning to recognize our own clues, our own judgments about things, our own symbolism about what things represent to us is really, really important. And I put a couple of symbols here because I'm trying to make this point that almost everything is about our judgment about it. If you look at the Buddhists, they talk about the samsaric wheel, because we don't just allow something to be what it is. We immediately attach grasping or aversion to it. So the Christmas time, we have that coming up. For some people, this is the best time of the year. They love all the lights and the shopping and everything that goes along with it, and being with their families. Other people might be of a different religion and it means nothing to them, or they're annoyed at all of that. Or like a friend of mine who's had several family members who all died at Christmas time. Christmas isn't a happy experience for him. It's just Christmas. We put whatever our own judgments are on top of it. The same thing with the beach. Some people think the beach is the most wonderful place where they get very recharged and they're relaxed and they think it's so beautiful. People like my father don't ever even want to go there. He's so afraid of water. He won't get up to his ankles in water. And it's just the beach. It depends on what our judgment of the situation is. And that judgment is what is obstructing our ability to receive that flow of divine source energy. I encourage you to look at the many disguises of judgment. Complaining. Eckhart Tolle says, don't complain, because it's always a judgment. Otherwise, you wouldn't be complaining about it. Procrastination, all kinds of distractions. Resentments, frustrations, that self-pity, why me? Competition is also actually, our team's good, their team's bad. Another form of judgment. So finding my own resistances helps me to become aware of these things and make different choices. When I started to become aware of complaining, which I didn't think I was a complainer, but I started to become aware, I realized I didn't have anything to talk to people about anymore. How was I going to have a conversation if we weren't sharing or commiserating about politics or the environment or my job or, oh, wow, I have to have a new way of being about this, a new way of talking about this. Judging the judging, really important to watch out for. It is the biggest pitfall as you start to become aware, because then, oh my God, I'm judging myself. I'm judging everyone else all the time. I must be a bad person. That sounds like judgment, doesn't it? And so being aware of that. And this was the thing I discovered about suffering, was that suffering was actually me judging myself about being a weakling, being vulnerable. I have this condition. I'm not a strong person anymore. I can't do. Well, please watch out for I can't. I can't is the biggest block to the flow of divine energy I have ever found in my life. Because when I can't do something, I can't do this because my condition doesn't allow me to. Whoa, that's a judgment, isn't it? I had to refuse to suffer. As the Buddha said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. It didn't make the pain go away, but it did help me to not be a victim anymore. And it helped me to get that wiggle room so that I wasn't tied up. My identity was not tied up with the suffering anymore. It doesn't deny the pain. It is important to not deny what you are feeling. That doesn't mean you can't make different choices about it. But most of the time, I spent denying that I felt like anything, because in my family, we weren't allowed to have any of those emotions. And so I wasn't allowed to have bad emotions, so I had no emotions at all. That just made me depressed, because I wasn't even allowed to feel whatever I was actually feeling. So I had to actually be able to learn to name my emotions before I could even do anything about them. I'm going to give you this little exercise that I developed about loss, because it's something that I've had to experience a lot of. And I realized that loss and freedom are actually two sides of the same coin. When we lose something, that piece of our identity, and I use this picture to show it because I see it like pixels of myself are going away. That isn't, I don't have that person in my life anymore, or that job, or whatever it was. And so I'm disintegrating. And that was really, really painful. And I didn't know what to do with myself, because if I'm not that anymore, who am I? That's a lot of freedom, actually, to be someone new. But it's also very frightening, because we don't like the unknown, and we particularly don't like not knowing who we are. But sometimes we have to not know how we're going to react to a new situation until we experience it. Otherwise, how can we make new choices? So I see we're at about an hour and a half here. I'm ready to quit, and we can ask questions.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Pizzino. This is a great place to be. I'm also in touch with the books of Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm actually reading a book and taking one of his programs, so it's good. And the other resources that you mentioned, those sound wonderful too. I don't know if there's a way. Well, it's in the recording, so we'll see it if we need to reference that again, we can go back to that. But thank you so much. And at this time, what we'd like to do is take about an 8-minute break, and just a bio, just to step away for a second and come back. And then we'll get into some question and answer if you're inclined to do that. Sound good? All right, folks. We're at 9:05, and we're not cutting anything out or off, but it is time to wrap it up. And I just wanted to thank our speaker tonight, Dr. Pizzino, JP. Thank you for your time and all your information. I got a lot out of it. I'd like everybody, if we can, just give her a quick hand of applause. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Great.